Welcome to Human Potential at Work, the show where we explore social impact, inclusion, and empowerment of everyone, including persons with disabilities. Get ready to be inspired, hear success stories, and learn tips and principles for bringing out the best in everyone. And now, here's your host and CEO of Ruh Global Impact, Debra Ruh.
Hi, everyone. This is Debra Ruh. Welcome to Human Potential at Work. I love all my guests, but I have a special place in my heart for LaMondre Pough. He is just a dear, dear friend, a mentor, and I think he's changing the world. So I'm just so honored to work with him, but also to be speaking with him today. So LaMondre, or I should say Dr. LaMondre Pough, welcome back to the program.
Thank you so much, Deborah, and I so appreciate being on Human Potential at Work, and I feel the same way about you, so ditto, lady.
I know, it's wonderful when you love the people you work with. So,
Absolutely.
but I really want to have, and even before we start the discussion, would you mind telling the audience who you are again, in case they don't know the amazing Dr. LaMondre Pough, but, give them a little bit of background of who you are and what you're doing, and just so they can get to know you if they don't yet.
Absolutely. Well, as Deborah said, I am LaMondre Pough. I am the Chief Sustainability Officer for Ruh Global Impact. And I've been an advocate for people with disabilities. I've been working in the diversity and inclusion industry for quite some time. I'm also an entrepreneur, and I just love people. In fact, I did a presentation about a week or so ago. And in the presentation, they listed my title as light bulb speaker. And the reason that they did that is because they asked me what was my passion, what did I love to do. I said I love communicating with people and sharing information, but most importantly, I love it when the light bulbs come on. And so they listed me as light bulb speaker. So I think I'm going to take that and run with it. Deborah, I'm a light bulb speaker. That's what I am.
I didn't know you could be a light bulb speaker. That is a great thing to be. I also think you're a futurist.
Yeah, absolutely. I probably am on some levels, but I tell you, I love what we do, and I love the work that we're involved in.
I do too. And what I want to talk to you about today, because I know we're doing some really cool things at Ruh Global Impact, and it's all about true social change. But I also think there's a lot of social change going on in the world, and we're partnering on some really interesting things to truly change the world for all of us. And
Right.
so I wanted to sort of have a conversation with you, LaMondre, a man that has a lived experience with a physical disability. And I want to talk a little bit about why are we not making the progress that actually we're seeing with some other communities? Now, we are making some progress. I mean, I think we got to celebrate that there are 419 global corporations that have joined the valuable 500 with Dr. Caroline Casey. And when they get to 500, they're at 500. So if you're a global brand and you're not involved, we're going to wonder why. But so, I mean, you have the brilliance of that and others, and we're doing some really, really cool things. But that's really the topic I wanted to explore a little bit more, because I still see the horrible unemployment rate for people with disabilities, especially people with visible disabilities. And of course, this applies to people with invisible and hidden disabilities as well. People don't feel comfortable disclosing, for example, but at the same time, I was on I'm on the board of directors of the World Institute on Disabilities. And the other day we had a board meeting, and the CEO, Marcy Roth, was saying that 96% of the deaths in the United States during COVID were people with disabilities and people in group settings. So that made my heart hurt real bad. And I mean, we continue to be a very vulnerable part of the populations, and we continue, especially when you look at from the lens in other countries, including the US, but there's a lot of countries where they don't even have the rights that we have in the US or in the UK or in other countries. So I wanted to explore that. And I do know that we actually have some solutions coming up with some of these things in the future. But I just think it's an important conversation to have. So, LaMondre, I know you just wrote an article with a couple of your peers that also have disabilities and work with, caregivers and stuff. And you were talking about just the expenses that you as an individual with a disability had to sustain during these COVID-19 as opposed to somebody that doesn't. So, I was just hoping we could explore some of these topics.
Absolutely, we can. I think that your question as to why has the progress for the disability community been slow in comparison to progress made in other communities. And I think one of the main reasons for that is because people with disabilities are seen as less valuable by and large. And of course, that's not true by any means when you consider that, first of all, there's over 1 billion people on the planet that have some form of disability, and that's billion with a B. So obviously it's not a true statement at all, but the perceived value of a person with a disability is less because disability has been made synonymous with something being broken, something being missing, something that's being wrong. We know that historically, many cultures have seen disability as a curse, or as some kind of a bad omen. So what ends up happening is you are then looking, when you see someone with a disability, oh, that's a bad thing. And it weaves its way into so many different facets of society and to the way that we think. For yourself, Deborah, I'm big on, when you see me, you see all of me. And, And I understand that sometimes people say, hey, LaMondre, when I see you, I don't see a disability. They mean it as a compliment, and they're well-meaning when they mean it as a compliment. But the truth is, what you're saying is, I see someone who has value. I see someone who brings something to the table. So I don't see something wrong with you. So not seeing your disability is not seeing what's wrong with you. And the truth is, with my disability, there is nothing wrong with me. I am absolutely 100% who I am, just as valuable, just as talented, just as smart, and can bring whatever it is that I bring to the table with or without my disability. In fact, my disability may inform my decisions to a point where I bring even more value to the table. So the first portion of that question is because people with disabilities are simply not regarded with equal or as high esteem as people without disabilities, number one. Number two, there has been, especially during this pandemic, there has been I almost want to say a rationing of thought that says that, okay, if you are vulnerable and you may not survive, you're not going to work so that you can survive. We've seen that when we saw this pandemic first happen, where an entire nursing home was abandoned by the staff and those people were left in there to die. That happened. We saw how in institutions, even in the U.S., how, the workers bring the virus in, or a visitor brings the virus in, and it runs through that nursing facility. So, these are the realities that we face. And I think the third thing, and this is something that the community of people with disabilities have to combat, I think that there's a lot of siloing. And what I mean by that is we like to group up in our corners. And if you're a person with an intellectual disability, you deal with those issues over there. If you're a person with mobility impairments, you're over here. If you're deaf, you're over there. And if you're blind, you're over there. And the truth is, we are stronger and better together. If we would come together and realize, you know what? We have the same values, we have the same wants, we have the same desires as everyone else does. We need to come together because we're stronger together. And so I believe those three factors are really contributors to why we have not been able to move forward as quickly as some other groups. But I'm an optimist. So I believe we're changing that right now. I believe that we've got some rockets, that we've got some ships, that we've got some mobility to move us forward. And I believe that 2020 and beyond is going to be amazing for all of us.
You know, LaMondre, I'm going to ask you a question. I want to go back to COVID in a minute, but before I do, I totally agree with what you're saying. You know, oh, your daughter has Down syndrome. You're on over here. Oh, I'm blind. But at the same time, also, then you have these categories inside of those. So if you are a African American man with a disability, that's a whole nother problem, right? Because the reality is, white people with disabilities get more access to services and stuff than African Americans and Asians and Latinos. And so it's like you have all these intersectionality crashes too. If you were a gay man or a part of the LGBT community and you have a disability. And I also, so I want to let you speak to that for a second, but I also want to comment on, I agree with something that you said, and I'm one of those people. We talked about this on another show that you did, which I highly recommend in going back and looking at the past episodes, and we'll make sure that we do them. But also, LaMondre Pough has his own show, and I highly recommend his show. I love his voice, but I also think it's just unfortunate how much we're not really addressing the intersectionality and the cultural issues. So it's very complicated. But I remember when my daughter was born with Down syndrome, well, when they told us Sarah had Down syndrome, she was 4 months old. And I'm sad to say, we all have to grow, but I didn't want anyone to know that my daughter had Down syndrome. I didn't accept anything was wrong with my daughter, but I think of myself now and I think how sad that because the doctor said your child is broken, I actually absorbed that and started thinking, and they brought up institutionalizing, and which, by the way, we pretty much had stopped doing that in the States at that point. Sarah's 33 years old and she is quite a woman. But it is so embedded in our society. It is about less than and broken, and it is exactly what you said earlier. I think I might bring more to the table because of my lived experiences. I mean, what happens when you're constantly put in the corner and said, okay, well, somebody will come and help you in a minute, talking about COVID-19, or what happened during, after we had the horrible 9/11 with the attacks on the towers in the United States. And they were saying, well, if you're a person in a wheelchair, just sit up in that stairwell and somebody will come get you. I'm sorry. So you're saying to me, I leave LaMondre in the stairwell that's on fire? Am I understanding you correct? So I wanted to toss that to you.
Right. No, listen, you asked what happens when that happens, either one or two things. Either you shrink, become small and die, or you roar and move forward and progress, and you find ways. And that whole scenario of, sit in the stairwell, that's because for me, disability is much more about environmental barriers that have been placed in people's path, whether that be intentional or non-intentional. The truth is, the reason that person would have to sit in a stairwell and wait is because there was a stairwell. Is because of the way that moving up and down that building was designed, that in the case of an emergency, someone who cannot necessarily navigate the stairs would not be there. Why did it have to be that way? Well, we think that it had to be that way because that's just the way we do it. But in reality, it did not have to be that way. It was designed that way. And if it was designed that way, it could be designed another way. So when we start thinking about the predicaments and the situations that we find ourselves in, particularly people with disabilities, much of it is not because it has to be that way. It's because this is how we designed it. We designed a world where people who might have typical ways of moving around or communicating or thinking or learning or what have you, barriers have been erected. And the truth is, it is not as simple as throwing up a ramp to really fix it. We want to think we can just patch up things. But if we started thinking from the beginning of the process of, can everybody use this? Is this something that people could really access? Is this something that people would actually utilize, cling to, work with? Then we may see things become a little bit different. For example, one of the things that I love now is the way that my phone, I have an iPhone, and now I have a MacBook Air. One of the things that I love about it was I was checking out the some of the accessibility features in it, and I was looking at dictation because I have a mobility impairment. I can't use my hands very effectively. So I have a mobility impairment, and I use dictation software. And I had heard, all kinds of things about the dictation software that's included, and you have to buy, this particular software because it's so much better. And hey, personal preferences, that's cool if that's what you want. But I opened it up on my MacBook Air, and I started dictating, and it was actually more accurate and faster than my specialized dictation software that I used. And it blew me away. And I was thinking, and this is just straight included with the system. It is not something that's special. It's not something that was added after the fact. It was made that way. What if we made the world that way? Because ultimately, we're responsible for this place. We're responsible for where we are. We're responsible for where we live. So who says that we couldn't make it accessible? Who says that we couldn't build it from the beginning with these kinds of things in mind? Because as you've heard me say a million times, Deborah, and I've heard you say it, when you make things better for people with disabilities, you make it better for everyone. So why not make it better for everyone from the beginning? And I believe that this is how we begin to move forward. Really, for me, it's a shift in the way that we think. Like, I am not an expert on buildings. I'm not an expert on computers. I'm not an expert on any of that stuff. But what I do know is that we have to shift the way that we think so that the people who are experts in those fields, they can use that expertise to build something that we've never imagined before, but we've always needed and always craved. And so this is the path that I believe we're on. I think that I really do think that we are standing on the edge of a new era. And I am so thankful to be a part of it. This is an incredible time to be alive. I don't care what anybody says, how bad 2020 was. This is an incredible time to be alive. And so let's do something with the time that we have.
And I really do believe that we all chose to be here during this time. I also believe that we are spiritual beings having a human experience. And once again, we chose to be here. And I think a lot of us want this world to work better for everyone and every inhabitant and the planet, this living planet that we're on right here. But I'm going to take you just back to the COVID thing. That and this is this makes me sort of sick. So, but I know that you're not a COVID priority. You live in South Carolina, and South Carolina, like other states, California, Florida, okay, stop, Deborah. Virginia actually is doing a better job. We actually are prioritizing people with disabilities, but I was so disappointed in South Carolina in that your caregivers can get the vaccine, but you can't.
Right. It's ridiculous. I'm in group 1, but I'm in group 1C, so I am the third leg of the group, and the only reason that is because I have pre-existing conditions. But here is the situation as it stands. So South Carolina prioritize healthcare providers, and they prioritize nursing home workers and residents of nursing homes or, long-term care facilities. And they also prioritized home health workers. However, they did not prioritize home health care recipients. Now, I want to give you some background for this, for why I feel the way that I do. I have been exposed twice to COVID-19. Each time it was because caregivers have come to my home and tested positive for COVID-19. Now, thank God, neither time was I actually infected with the virus, but both times it was because they came into my home to provide care. Now, here's the thing. In order for me to live my life, that is a risk that I have to take. I have to have people come into my home to help me because I have spinal muscular atrophy. And for those of you who don't know me or my story, as I said, I have difficulties using my hand. Let me give you some real context to that. I really can't use anything from my neck down. I have very little movement in my hands, so that means that I need help with bathing, toileting, feeding, everything that pretty much encompasses interacting with my environment. If I can't do it by voice, someone else has to do it for me. And so I have to have people who come into my home to help me. So in order to live my life, I don't have the option of saying, keep everybody out. Don't have that option. It's not an option for me. So what I do is I make certain that everyone wears their mask. We make certain that we wipe down surfaces. We do all the things that they told us to do. I mean, washing hands, singing the birthday song, all of that stuff. We do those things, but there is nothing that will 100% protect you from this. And so twice I've had known issues to go on. And so here's the thing. I'm not going out. I've only been to 3 places since March. Since last March, I've only been 3 places. Only been outside of my home 3 times since March. So the only way for it to come in is for somebody to bring it in. So my thinking is, if you are going to vaccinate the people who are going into people's homes, shouldn't you also vaccinate the people whose home they're coming to? So it just seems to make sense to me. But that's not what they did. Another thing, parents of medically fragile children, they can get vaccinated, but their children can't. So it makes absolutely zero sense. And I think that this is a problem when you don't have national leadership at the helm to help guide these guidelines, to help orchestrate these guidelines. And hopefully things are changing now. I've read some things this morning that said, because national leadership has stepped up, that, things could change drastically pretty quickly. And I'm praying that that's the case. But in the meantime, we're advocating here in South Carolina to change that. And we're going to continue to do so. Hopefully our voices will be heard in that.
I think it goes back to what you said about everything else. We have to have the will to do this. We have to have the will to do it. We have to stop in society deciding that other people are less than us for whatever reason, the color of their skin, they have a disability, they love the wrong sex, whatever your made up stuff is. We have to stop thinking that people are born with a disability because God is punishing you from some karma you did in another life, or the ridiculousness that we hear all over the world. It's just ridiculous. And so
I remember. Go ahead.
Go ahead. No, you go ahead.
I was going to say, I remember when I was a kid, and this is a testament to where we've come from, but it's also, it also says to the work that we still need to do. I remember when I was a kid, we would go to certain people's houses, and there was, an auntie, an uncle, a sister, or somebody that would be in the back room, and they wouldn't come out when company came. And it wasn't because they didn't want to come out. It was because they were a person with a disability. And for some reason, there was shame associated with that in that family. So they kept that person locked in the room. And I know that that was not just an experience that I saw in the communities that I grew up with. We all know people who had an auntie or an uncle or a family member or a friend who, when you went to their house, that person was in the back room and they wouldn't come out. You could hear them, and honestly, so in society, many of us are still in the back room, and we're seen as back room folks, but I'm telling you, it's changing. It's changing. And I know people say, well, it's just a symbolic thing. Well, we need some symbols as well. Symbols are important.
Mm-hmm.
I love the fact that I'm now starting to see advertisements and TV shows and models who are people with disabilities, and they don't necessarily fit what is, quote, the norm, unquote, but they're still beautiful. They're still out there. They're still living their lives. And it's not focused on disability. Debra talked about intersectionality, and we've been doing a lot of work in this space recently, talking about the intersectionality of race and disability, or sexuality and disability, or what have you, and disability. Because here's the thing, even though I am a man with a disability, I'm still a man. I'm still a black man. I'm still a black man raised in the South. And I'm still sexy and all that kind of good stuff and so much more. Listen, if I don't believe it, I don't think anybody else will. So let me just throw that out there, okay? But the thing is, we have got to start looking at the whole person and realizing I am a whole person. Disability is not the defining point about LaMondre Pough, but it's certainly a defining point. It's certainly a part of who I am, along with all of those other things that make me me, all of those things that make me unique. Debra's one of the most unique individuals I know. I just can't say, yeah, Debra's a woman and that's it. No, Debra's a purple-haired woman. I mean, come on, there's so much more. There's so much more to all of us. And when we really begin to recognize the value of all of who we are, we really begin to move forward. And that's why I say we've come a long way, because no, I'm not locked in a closet or in the back room. My family has never done that to me, but I know families who have. And so we're not in the back rooms anymore, but we've got so much further to go. And yeah, so I wanted to point that out because I felt like that was important to say.
I think it's very important, and I talk a lot about self-love on the program, and we have to love ourselves. We have to love ourselves. And I'm different, and I think that I have purple in my hair, and I get weird looks, and it's interesting, the response, and there's a reason why I went it in the first place. I love the color, but I also went with it because I remember turning 60, and I've said this on air before too, but I turned 60 and I started hearing, oh, 50 is the new 60. And I've been hearing that for a while. Oh, 40 is the new 20. It feels like somehow I'm dishonoring younger women, because 60 is not the new 20. 60 is not the new 50. 60 is the new 60. And by the way, I worked hard to get to 60. I worked really hard to get to 60, and I don't want to dishonor the younger women. And I also want the younger women to say, well, maybe I could be old and 60 and have gray hair, and maybe I'll put some purple in there and some blue or whatever, but why not have a little bit of fun? Could we have a little bit of fun? And so it's sort of who I am, but I really think self-love is so important. But I also want to talk to you a little bit about employment. Employment it's such an interesting word, employment of people with disabilities, and the statistics and everything, because we want to honor our entire community. And I'm part of our community. I have ADHD, I have some dyslexia. Before we went on air, Doug said, look to the right. Oh, I am so dyslexic. So I'm like, the right. Okay, Debra, remember, and I was in the marching band. So I always wondered why my brain couldn't remember that right and left, but I understand how my unique brain works now, and I honor it. But at the same time, and I was saying this to a corporation one time, I was saying, yeah, but the reality is the people that are not being included in the workforce are the people with the more severe physical disabilities. And they were like, are you saying that it's easy to accommodate somebody that has ADHD or dyslexia? And I said, well, yeah, I do think it's easy. We know how to do it as a society. But what I'm saying is people with dyslexia and ADHD have been in the workforce. Now, they often are underemployed, not utilized properly, considering their brains are amazing and unique. But the reality that you and I have talked about, people with some more severe disabilities, people using power wheelchairs and things like that, they can't use their hands, they use technology in different ways, they are terribly being left out of the workforce. I know that you, as a man that has so much to offer, you've struggled with your career, which I don't understand, because I don't know, you need to be in the workforce. And I'm so glad that you're part of, our team. But so and then once again, as somebody who's getting older and seeing my friends acquire disabilities for the first time in their life, including my husband, who they now have told us that he has Alzheimer's, not dementia, just words, whatever. My husband still, and our entire family's walking a very difficult path with him, very sad path. But we have to understand it's part of being human, disabilities. It's a very, very big part of being human. And having a disability does not mean you're trash or you're throwaway or you're broken. It means that you probably are a bit of a problem solver, especially if you acquired your disability at birth or at an early age, because the world was not made for you for whatever reason. And you talked about that earlier on the show.
Yeah. I tell you, it's a very nuanced conversation. It's a very, it's the kind of thing whereas people with disabilities as a whole have certainly experienced oppression, have certainly experienced being held back and excluded. And of course, in situations where you can hide that, where you don't have to disclose and still function, it's you can still be present and not be picked on. We'll put it that way. Okay. And the reason that I say that is because I know my friends who do have disabilities that you don't see. I know that they've also really struggled. Even it may be that they've got the job, but for some reason people just don't understand why they take notes like that, or why would they need this particular time. And even if it's explained, it's still not appreciated. So I don't want to minimize what that experience is. Now, having said that, it is much easier to discriminate on something you can see versus something you cannot. For example, do an over-the-phone interview. They love your resume. You blow them out the water on the over-the-phone interview, and they're excited to meet you. And when you show up, we just filled that position. Or, we decided to go another way. But then the next week you see the exact same position being advertised on Indeed or any of these sites that you see. It was wait a minute, I was the perfect candidate before. What happened? What changed? Was it my chocolateness that changed your mind? Or was it the fact that I rolled into the office and had to ask, where was the accessible park? So what was it? So, there are so many things that we have to address. And I'll tell you, the COVID-19 pandemic has exposed a lot of things. And one of the things that it has exposed was the fact that we can do business differently, that we can work from home, we can make systems accessible, because all of a sudden organizations who said there's no way that we can have our workforce work from home and expect productivity to remain. There's no way that we can make this specific accommodation to a system that we've always used. And when everybody went home and Mother Nature said, sit down, we had to. We had to do it, and we did it quickly, and we did it effectively. And what we saw was a rise in productivity. What we saw is a rise in availability. And this is what people have been saying for the longest. This is what we've been praying for the longest in terms of access to systems. And I will tell you, I am a firm believer, and this is one of the things that made me become an entrepreneur. When they won't hire you, hire yourself. Find out what your skills are. Find out what problems you can solve. Find out what you're able to do better than most, and offer that as a solution. Put it out there and just lead with your talent, lead with your insights, lead with your solution, and people will pay you for it. Because here's the thing. I understand that while we're working to make employment more accessible, while we're working to make employment practices more amenable to people with disabilities, the truth is people with disabilities still have to eat. And so while we're working, let's also work. Become an entrepreneur. Look at what it is that you can offer. Create that job for yourself, or better yet, create an industry for yourselves and others. I love the fact that my prognosis was that I would never be able to work, that I wouldn't finish college, that I wouldn't get married. Well, just so you'll know, I have a doctorate degree, and not only do I have a job, I also employ other people. And guess what? I've been divorced. So not only did I get married, I got divorced. So in other words, the possibilities are out there, and it hasn't been easy. I don't want anybody to think that my life is even easy now. It's not. I struggle daily, and I go through things daily, but life is worth living, and I'm in for the fight. And I just encourage you to be in for your fight as well.
And I also want to say that people with disabilities, as LaMondre is saying, they want to be taxpayers. They're proud to pay taxes. They don't want handouts. Stop, society, stop assuming. Do we need to help certain members of our society? Absolutely. But a lot of times when we're helping, we're actually creating more barriers for the individuals. We're not treating people with disabilities like they're really whole, and they are completely whole. So I just really appreciate you. I also know that we're working really hard on this very cool mentoring program that we're doing, and representation matters, and really looking at these from the lens of professionals with disabilities, professionals.
Right.
And so we have some really, really exciting things that we're doing, system changes and really big changes coming up. And we always look from the lens of international, because we need to take care of our own. We need to take care of our own locally and nationally, but we must take care of everyone globally as well. We cannot leave our brothers and sisters behind in our non-binary and all of that. We can't leave them behind in other countries because they were born in the Philippines as opposed to South Carolina. But so we got to fight for everybody. We got to really make sure everybody's voice is heard. And I think that's why, once again, your leadership is so powerful in these conversations. So I know we're out of time, but I want to give you time to let people know how they can find you on social media. They can find your shows. And of course, you know, Ruh Global is one place you can find a lot LaMondre is doing, but, you know, tell the audience how they can learn more about what you're doing.
Absolutely. You can contact me on social media. On Facebook, I am LaMondre Pough, LaMondre Pough. On Instagram and Twitter, LaMondre_P. That's LaMondre_P. And also, I have a YouTube channel, LaMondre Pough. So if you want to get me, you can get me anywhere. And of course, you can find me at ruhglobal.com, ruhglobal.com. And let me say this. You're right, Deborah. We have to look at this thing from a global perspective, and that's because we're living in a global time. And as Martin Luther King said, a threat to justice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. So we're all in this together.
We are, and we are really trying to change the conversation and to make sure we're also letting you know who else is trying to change the conversation, which is why we have all these shows. Another show we didn't mention, LaMondre has another show called 3D View, which is with two other gentlemen. And yeah, and maybe you can just, before we jump off, can tell the audience a little bit about 3D View, because I love that show too.
Absolutely. 3D View is a show with myself, Richard Strites, and David Perez. And it's 3 different perspectives, 3 different viewpoints, 1 topic, 1 conversation. And we tackle topics from all over the place, from identity to, you know, the riots at the Capitol, to actually just letting you know who we are. And we absolutely love doing this show. We produce it weekly, and it's really just three guys having a conversation. It's a conversation amongst friends. And if you want to find it, it is 3D View, and that is the number 3, the letter D, the letter V, the letter U. 3D View.
And of course, all of our shows are on our website and on our YouTube channel, Debra Ruh Global, which, that's just the name that we picked. I wish it was just Ruh Global, but that's okay. It's Debra Ruh Global. And we're just really, really proud. That's right. But thank you to my audience. Thank you to everybody that supports what we're doing. Thank you to LaMondre and all the rest of our team. And please stay tuned. We've got some really, really, really exciting news coming up in the next few months that we believe are going to be major global changes. And we believe in partnering, collaborating with people all over the world. Very proud to be heavily engaged in these conversations. And we believe that this is the way forward. And I also agree with LaMondre that this is a good time to be alive. Might be hard sometimes, but it's a good time to be alive. And this is when we can really advance the human race and really, really appreciate what we all can bring to the table if we have the will to make it happen. So LaMondre, thank you so much for being on the show. Special thanks to my producer, Douglas Foresta, which we just adore and love, and to everybody that's part of this. Thank you all so much for watching the show and subscribing to it and liking it. All of those things really help. So we appreciate everybody, and I will definitely have Dr. LaMondre Pough come back on the show, and also he's available for speaking engagements. So he's pretty busy, but he's a fabulous speaker. So thank you, LaMondre. Appreciate you.
Thank you.
Bye,
Thank
everyone.
you, Debra.
You've been listening to Human Potential at Work, brought to you by Ruh Global Impact. Make sure to subscribe to the podcast on Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you consume your audio. To learn more about Ruh Global Impact and the services we provide, visit ruhglobal.com. To learn more about how you can become a sponsor of Human Potential at Work, email David at ruhglobal.com. That's David at ruhglobal.com. Thanks so much for listening, and we'll be back next time with a new episode.